Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And I welcome you to another session of part modeling exercise. So, this part is very familiar with you now. And for this session, we'll be using Autodesk Inventor. So, with that in mind, let's get started. I'm going to go to New. So, this part is obviously in metric. I'm going to go to Templates, Metric folder, and double click standard millimeter.ipt. I'm going to hit letter L for line, and now we are prompted to select a plane. I'm going to select our XZ plane. So now I am in the line command. Instead, I'm going to go to rectangle and select 2-point center rectangle. Left click. I'm going to drop our center, the center of our rectangle at the origin. Left click. Now for the height, it is 225. I'm going to hit tab. And for the width, I'm going to key in 210. 210, pressing enter. I'm going to double click my middle mouse to zoom extents. I'm going to hit E for extrude. So now we are prompted to select a profile, and it has already been selected. So the profile is this one. Now the height would be 35. I'm going to key in 35. And hit OK. Going to home view. Now moving forward, I prefer that whenever we click home view, the default view state would be like this. So to have this isometric view as default, I'm going to click this corner of our view cube. I'm going to right click and select set current view as home. So I'm going to select fit to view. Now if you remember, in our 2D drawing, we have a parameter, which is A is equal to 225 and B is equal to 210. So as early as now, we can assign parameters. I'm going to go to parameters. So 225 is equal to A. I'm going to type in A. And 210 would be B. And finally, hit done. And once again, examining our 2D drawing, it seems that the best strategy would be the thickness of this one should be 25. So we can edit this one by going to extrusion. I'm going to right click and select edit feature. So here, I'm going to type in 25 and hit the green check mark. Next, I'm going to hit L for line, and now we are prompted to select a plane. I'm going to select this face as our plane. I'm going to drop our first point at the edge. Next one here. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hit L once more, dropping our point here. Next point here. Hitting escape. Next, I'm going to head up to create and selecting 3-point arc. First point at the end point. Next one at this end point. I'm going to move down and release. I'm going to hit escape to disable the arc command. Next, I'm going to secure that the endpoint is perfectly coincident with our edge. I'm going to go to constraint and select coincident. Selecting this endpoint and this edge. This endpoint and this edge. And hit escape to disable the command. Next, I'm going to align our center point horizontally with this line and vertically with this line. I'm going to head to constraints, selecting horizontal, selecting our center point. So notice when I hover my mouse over our center point, we are given a yellow dotted line. So meaning the effect would be vertical. So selecting our center point and this end point. Next, selecting vertical constraint, selecting the center point and this end point. Hitting escape. Grabbing our dimension by hitting letter D. So now it is active. I'm going to select our vertical line and our vertical edge, going down and dropping our dimension here. So C is 176, pressing enter. Dimension tool still active, selecting our horizontal line and our horizontal edge, dropping our dimension here and keying in 176. Dimension tool still active, selecting this horizontal line, moving up, keying in 80, pressing enter. Selecting this vertical line, dropping our dimension here. So notice it is already fully constrained. I can now hit cancel. In addition, our entity is turned into dark blue, meaning it is fully constrained. Next, I'm going to hit O for offset and select our chain of entities, left click, and keying in 15 and pressing enter. Hitting escape. And finally, now if I hover my mouse over this area, it doesn't highlight, meaning this is still an open region. So what I can do, I can select specific entities and move them. So confirm it is an open loop. This one as well. So now we have to apply a coincident constraint to lock this endpoint to the edges. Grabbing coincident tool, selecting our endpoint and our edge, endpoint and our edge. I'm going to hit escape. Next, I'm going to hit F8 to have a visibility of our constraints. So this is still an open loop. I'm going to hit L for line, dropping our first point here, next point here, first point, second point, hitting escape. Now to verify if this is already a closed loop, I can hit E, the shortcut for extrude. Now we are prompted to select a profile. Selecting this profile, I'm going to grab this arrow up, or better yet, key in 95. Hitting the check mark and selecting our home view. Shift middle mouse to rotate. Going back to home view once more. Next, let's create the feature here. Elevated at 35, the square one. I'm going to hit S for sketch, selecting this face as our sketch plane. I'm going to go to rectangle, selecting 2 point. Dropping our first point here and second point here. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hit D for dimension. Selecting this horizontal line and this horizontal line. Dropping our dimension here, keying in 60. Dimension tool still active. Selecting this vertical line and this vertical line. Dropping our dimension here. So obviously this one is square. I can select 60 so that D12 would be equal to D11. Hitting the green check mark. Next, I'm going to grab our coincident constraint. Zooming in, selecting this point and this endpoint. Now it is fully constrained. I'm going to hit E. Now the height of extrusion would be 35 minus 25 is 10. So keying in 10 and hit the green check mark. Going back to home view, I'm going to add a hole here. Selecting this face and selecting create sketch. Moving up and grabbing point. I'm going to drop our point here. I'm going to hit escape. So the purpose of this point is to be at the center. To make this one at the center, I'm going to hit L for line. I'm going to drop our first point here, second point here. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to grab our coincident constraint, selecting the endpoint and this edge, this endpoint and this corner. I'm going to hit escape. Grabbing once again our coincident constraint, selecting our point and locating the midpoint of our line. Left click, hitting escape. So now we have located the middle or the center of the square. I'm going to make this one as a construction line. Left click, right click, and select construction. And now I'm going to go and select finish sketch. Now I can hit H for hole, or I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to select our newly created point. And now we have a dialog. We have here create hole. So selecting create hole, making sure it's counter bore. Counter bore diameter is 30. Depth is 10. And the termination is through all. Through hole diameter is 15. And finally hit OK. Going back to home view. Our next point of interest is this face to create the recess area. But first, I'm gonna add a fillet on this edge. So selecting this one, left click, and selecting fillet. Now the value for this one is 9, keying in 9 and hitting the green check mark. Going back to home view, selecting this face and selecting create sketch. Going to our view cube and selecting this curved arrow pointing down. So this one will rotate. As you can see, I'm going to go to project geometry. I'm going to project this face. Next, I'm going to select offset. Selecting this projected edges. And the value for this one is 9. Pressing enter. Going to top view. Now I can hit E for extrude. Prompted to select a profile. Selecting this profile. Dragging our arrow down to create a cut. Now according to our 2D drawing, the bottom thickness of this part should be 5. So it's 25 minus 5, which is 20. I'm going to hit OK. And to check, I can hit letter M for measure, selecting this face and selecting this bottom face. So confirmed, it is 5. I'm going to close measure distance, go back to home view. Now I'm going to hit Control Shift C for a circle and prompted to select a plane or face, selecting this face. I'm going to pan, zoom in. I'm going to drop our first point here. Now the diameter of this circle is A divided by 3. So 225 divided by 3. Pressing enter. I'm going to grab our coincident constraint, select our center point and our midpoint. I'm going to hit E for extrude. For direction, I'm going to select asymmetric. I'm going to rotate. I'm going to drag this arrow on this direction, this one. Now for this direction, I'm going to key in 10. And for this direction, so it's 137 minus 10. This should be 127. The one for dimension D. And hit OK. So once again, to confirm, I'm going to hit M for measure, selecting this face and this face, and confirm it really is 137 in length. Closing measure distance and going back to home view. Now before we create the second cylinder here, let's go back to parameters. And let's define x, which is equal to A divided by 3. So this is it. It's D34. I'm gonna type in x, and here I'll type in A divided by 3. In addition, I'm going to create a user parameter for dimension D. I'm going to select add numeric. I'm going to key in D. So in the equation, I'm going to select D35 plus D36. And finally, hit done. Let's now create the cylinder here. Control Shift C for a circle. I'm going to rotate and select this face. I'm going to drop our center point here. Now, if you remember, we have already defined parameter x. So I can type in x and press enter. Next, I'm going to grab our coincident constraint, select our center point and the midpoint of this edge. I'm going to hit E for extrude. I'm going to select asymmetric. I'm going to grab this arrow moving to the left and key in 127. And finally hit OK. Going back to home view. Let's now create the holes on our cylinders. Control Shift C for a circle. Selecting this face. Dropping our center point here. And the value for E is 39. Pressing enter. I'm going to go to our constraints and select concentric. Selecting this circle and this newly created circle. I'm going to hit E for extrude. Selecting this profile. Dragging our arrow to the left. For the distance, I'm going to select 2. and selecting this face so that the cut extrusion would be up to this face. Selecting the green check mark and repeating the steps on the next cylinder. Control Shift C. Selecting this face, dropping our center point here, keying in 39, pressing enter, grabbing concentric, selecting this circle and this circle, pressing E for extrude, selecting this profile, moving our arrow to the left. For distance, selecting 2 and selecting this face, and finally hit OK. Going back to home view and going to parameters, let's define our dimension E, which is 39. So I'm going to type in here E. And same here for D52. I'm going to key in E and hit done. Inspecting our model tree. So it seems that sketch 10 is unconsumed. I'm going to right click and edit sketch, and there is nothing inside. I'm going to finish sketch and delete sketch 10. So right click and delete. So now let's add the fillets. I'm going to select this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, and select fillet. Now the radius should be 10, keying in 10 and hitting the green check mark. And lastly, at the corners, the 4 corners of our base. So the fillet should be 10. Selecting this edge. Selecting this edge and this edge. And selecting fillet. Keying in. This is also 10. Hit OK. And finally, let's add the chamfer. Selecting this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. Selecting chamfer. The value for this one is 2. And hit the green check mark. Going back to home view. High five and congratulations for completing this part model. And I hope to see you soon on our next part modeling exercise.